Welcome into the KSO Show. I am Mason Voth. That is KSU fan Andrew Galloway. And if you can't tell, we are all in the same hotel room because, in lieu of an instant reaction, we just got out of Jack Trice Stadium as fast as possible and decided we're going to knock this sucker out for everybody for the Sunday show and unpack the regular season, which came to an end just before the clock headed over to December, and K-State loses to Iowa State 29-21. Chris Klieman now 2-4 against Iowa State, and K-State finishes the regular season at 8-4, which in the past 8 wins is nothing to be upset about, but certainly the way that this 8-win season came about for K-State, you have pretty good reason to be upset, disappointed, and not feel like this was a successful season. And we'll dive into all of that here tonight, today, whenever you're listening to this KSO show. But I'll start with you, Drew. What were your thoughts on how K-State and Iowa State played out tonight?
It felt like kind of like classic Farmageddon, where there was a lot of chaos. Neither team really played even a C game, to be honest. Because I would say it was just daring K-State to try and win the game, and K-State just kept shooting themselves in the foot and not converting on a lot of opportunities. But I think the main takeaway, and it happened on the first play from scrimmage, is that again K-State has issues turning the ball over in these losses. Chris Klieman talked about it on Monday in the press conference, saying that the one real thing that has been tangible in the losses that K-State's had this season has been turnovers and explosive plays. Well, Iowa State wasn't very explosive tonight, but K-State turned the ball over in critical points, because we kind of talked about it a little bit before the game, leading up to it, while we were just waiting for the game to get going, that K-State has seemed to turn the ball over a lot in their own territory, and that happened again tonight, twice, and once being on the first play of the game. So that's probably my biggest takeaway, is that the biggest issue in these losses reared its ugly head again tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was turnovers played a big role in this, and starting the game with it. I mean, I told DY on whatever day it was, Friday, yesterday, that we're going to know what kind of game it's going to be for K-State early, because in all of these losses this year, they failed to score a touchdown on their first 2 drives of the game. And it's really gotten even worse over the last couple, because BYU, you had to settle for the field goals and some penalties stalled you out or whatever, but the defense was playing well. So you even felt like for a stretch in that game, K-State was in control of it. But you think of the Houston game, like pretty foreboding that Jace Brown should have had a touchdown but was running out of bounds, so it didn't count. Then you settle for the field goal. It was an ugly one. You let Houston go down immediately. The Arizona State game, second play of the game, Avery Johnson throws an interception. And then obviously tonight you have on the very first play from scrimmage, the pitch to Dylan Edwards that does not go the way that K-State would have liked it to have. So, Fan, from your perspective, what went wrong on that play? And then what do you think of the decision to call that on the very first play of the game?
The issue with the play, I mean, I like that they were trying to get Dylan Edwards involved from the start, in a semi-creative way, something we haven't seen. In my opinion, I think if Dylan Edwards is another 2 yards behind Avery Johnson on the pitch, instead of being even with Avery Johnson on the pitch, that's going to be a big play. I don't know if he scores or not. We had a H-back. I don't know which one it was, maybe Lofton out blocking ahead of the play. So it was well set up. They got the numbers. They got the look they wanted on the defensive side, which is, one part of a successful play. Then the next part is execution. And, of course, that didn't happen. Ball goes on the ground. It's debatable whether it was maybe a forward pass. But when you put the ball on the ground on a pitch, when everybody knows it's an option play and not a pass, you're really hoping upon hope that ball goes forward. In that situation, it didn't. We've seen it where K-State had a not that kind of play, but we had that go in their favor. This time it did not. So that was foreboding. Led to a 27-yard drive for a touchdown. And then later, Iowa State gets the ball at the 48 and gets 29 yards for a field goal, and then gets the ball at K-State's 30 once again after a fumble and has to go 20 yards because of a penalty with their offense for a score. So you're talking, basically 70-some yards to get 17 points. And that's hard to overcome. We saw the same thing happen against BYU. Saw a little bit of that happen against Houston. So the turnover issue, but just the big thing is the inconsistency of the offense. Here's the thing. K-State is probably going to set a school record this year for yards per play. They're about 6.5 yards per play. Right now, I think they would have the school record for yards per play, and they're going to go 8-4. And part of that is the defenses they've played. They've played some not very good defenses, so that's part of it. But part of it is they did address being more explosive on offense, and we saw that today. We had a 65-yard pass, 36-yard run on a drive that K-State didn't get points out of, and some other nice big plays in the running game by Avery Johnson, especially as well. So, you just can't make those kind of mistakes against good teams on the road and win. You can't make those. I mean, K-State's proven you can't make mistakes like that against bad teams on the road and win against Houston. So just not K-State's day. It's disappointing to finish 1-3 in the last 4 games in November when you went into the month looking at Arlington as a real possibility.
Yeah, and Chris Klieman kind of addressed and talked about that after the game because this team was in that position. They were 7-1 at the start of the month. They lose 3 of their last 4. The Houston game, you can say weird one, weather. Those games happen. They came out, looked flat, didn't take care of their business in a game against Arizona State that they should have been up for. You beat the crap out of a bad team in Cincinnati last week, and then you come on the road and had every chance to win this game. And throughout most of it, I mean, K-State had to do a lot more in this game, and they succeeded a lot more in this game than Iowa State. But and this is what concerned me about the matchup with Iowa State is Iowa State wasn't going to make mistakes. And so they may do some things not very well, and we saw that tonight. I mean, Rocco Beck had over 20 incompletions on the night. He was 13 of 35. So he completed 37% of his passes. It's not like Avery Johnson was much better. He completed 43% of his passes. But what did happen was Iowa State didn't turn the ball over. They didn't give K-State short fields, and you go again and you look at this thing and how it worked out. Iowa State's first scoring drive of the night, they had to go 6 plays, 27 yards for a touchdown. We've talked about this a lot. Their second scoring drive, the field goal to take the lead back, 9 plays, 29 yards. Their next drive, 5 plays, 30 yards is what they needed for a touchdown from Jalen Knoll. The only drive on the night that they had to manufacture to get points was really that 78-yard drive right before the half ended to go into the halftime break. And, there were parts of that that are inexcusable. I mean, I think the officiating crew had a tough night. There was a pass interference call at one point that was iffy. The face mask call might have been a little ticky-tacky and some other stuff that went on. But this is the thing. Like, we have seen the officiating in all sports, I think, has gotten harder for these guys. Players are playing at a bigger and faster pace than they ever have before. And so it's tough for these guys to keep up with it and see all the things that are happening. And so you have to be better to not allow the game to be left up to that situation. And too many times this year, we've had the conversation about, man, K-State could have really used a break here or a break there. And you feel like maybe they're burnt by some of this. And they are, but they do it to themselves. And you can't feel sorry when there's the 2 turnovers. But Chris Klieman talked about some of that after the game. And I know that I knew the second he said some of the things tonight that the fans were not going to be happy about it. I think I looked at somebody and said the fans are going to be pissed about that. And it already seems like that has started. One of his comments was about how difficult it is right now in college football and that, they've won 8 games for the 4th year in a row. I get why people are upset. You don't want to hear it like that. But at the end of the day, there is a tone in which Chris Klieman meant that. And he means it in a way that he doesn't want to try and end this season, because the season's over at this point, essentially. Yes, they play a bowl game. Yes, they want to win it. Yes, they want to try and erase some of the bad taste out of the mouth of everything. But it doesn't do them a lot of good right now as the season comes to a close and to start, bad mouthing and, bashing each other. I think he's trying to keep things positive. He clearly knows if you're a pretty dull person or ignorant or just flat stupid, if you think that Chris Klieman is okay with how the season ended, if you think that Chris Klieman is okay with just winning 8 games every year, if you think that Chris Klieman isn't going to make changes on this staff, I think you're all of those things. He obviously is upset about how this played out. He knows that there are problems. He's trying to figure out what they are, but he's also not the type of person that's going to go in to the post-game press conference and say, F the OC, F this player, F that player, they suck, they did this. It's just not the kind of guy he is. So, yes, you can be upset about how it looks. It doesn't look good for him. But at the end of the day, he didn't mean it in a way of, yeah, I'm cool with settling for 8 wins. Because I'm pretty sure that the guy that has already won a Big 12 title would probably like to win another one and like to win more games than 8 and everything else that goes into it. So you can be upset. You deserve to be upset. And you can pop off some snarky tweets. I mean, I certainly would. But at the end of the day, think about this a little bit more and realize what he's doing there and how he's kind of trying to handle this situation in a positive way, which also, like, he's got to try and handle momentum in this sport right now and carry that into the offseason and into next year. And you can't really do that if the tone of the program from the leader is negative right now. So I know that quote and some of the other ones look bad, aren't very good, and it was a bad way to finish the season. He doesn't mean it in the literal sense that everybody is taking it. You have to, just do a little critical thinking and understand speech and how humans speak sometimes. And that was not him being happy with how things ended, but he's just trying to kind of stick up for his guys, which he also said in there, like, I know people want me to come in here and kill my guys or whatever. He's not going to do it. So he's trying to take some arrows for his team right now. And I think he knows that he needs to make some changes, and I think they will happen. I mean, the one thing, if you want to try and be positive about this, is that this team is obviously not very far off from doing some of the things that everybody wants them to do. I mean, I don't think there's a single game this year where the opponent beat K-State. Maybe the closest that we came to seeing that was the Arizona State game, because I think it was going to be pretty tough to beat Jordan Tyson on that night. Arizona State is playing like the best team in this league. But BYU, you gifted them 2 scores, like literally, and then you had 2 others that were short fields. And a lot of times the turnover and short field thing played out this season, and that's what did it. I don't think Houston did anything extraordinary to beat K-State. I don't think Iowa State did. I think K-State had more good plays tonight than what Iowa State did. But K-State, once again, made too many catastrophic mistakes, too many stupid mistakes, and it ended with a 4th loss and now 8-4. And this is not a good 8-4 season. K-State, if you can take 8 wins, and you'd be silly to just kind of wash that away. And, the people that want to get rid of Chris Klieman or get rid of Avery Johnson, I have zero time for you. You're just, you're not thinking about this the right way. Yes, there are flaws. Yes, they have to get better, but so does everybody. And an 8-win season, while not good, this is the floor for Chris Klieman right now. Like, we haven't seen him do worse than this. You're also an idiot if you're trying to say 2020. So, if you're an Iowa State fan that's, Big 12 regular season champs 2020, or the, Wichita State won their conference basketball title. No, doesn't count. Whatever. So what I'm trying to say here is that I'm not worried about the job that Chris Klieman is doing. And I think that he wants to kind of get this thing turned around. He's going to try and be positive about it, at least publicly. Because he knows behind closed doors he has to be negative. He's going to have to be the bad guy, whether that's in a couple days or a couple weeks. It's going to have to happen. So I don't know. This is a tough time to kind of understand everything because I think everybody just wants to be mad, but this program needs to be better. There's no doubt about that. But 8 wins is at the bottom of it. You're going to have down seasons, and if 8 wins is down for you, that's an okay spot to be. You just got to make sure that it doesn't continue to happen because, last year's team won 9 games. And in the moment, we're kind of like, man, they should have won more. You look at it, Iowa State's really the only inexcusable loss last year. But besides that, they lost on the road at Missouri by a score, who went on to win the Cotton Bowl. They went on the road, lost in overtime by a score to Texas, who played in the college football playoff. And then what was the other one? I can't even remember what the other one was last year. Oh, Oklahoma State, who played for the Big 12 title. And that one, retroactively, you should probably feel even worse about it after seeing how things played out this year. But again, and then the year before that, you win the Big 12, you win 10 games. It's a crappy year. It's a crappy finish. It's not a good season. This was a failure of a season for K-State. I'm comfortable saying that. But it doesn't mean that Chris Klieman's a failure. It doesn't mean that Avery Johnson's a failure. And it doesn't mean that this program is going to fail moving forward. It doesn't mean that they're going to fail next season. So that's a lot of words. That's a lot for me. I'll let Drew take over here, and he can give his state of the program address. State of the Union, Drew Galloway.
So my State of the Union, I guess, would be pretty similar to what you have said. I still feel good about K-State's program going forward. I do think that there needs to be changes because you kind of can get complacent if you don't have new blood come in and new ideas and fresh ideas come in and kind of go about college football in that way, because it is just so hard to win, and is what makes winning 8 games every year so impressive, and just having that consistency, because you don't see that in sports or college sports especially, because it feels like everybody has an up and down year. But I do agree that 8-4 this season just feels kind of gross in the sense that you were 7-1 going to the Houston game, and you really thought that 8-1 getting to that second bye was really on the table, and then you lost to Houston, and then it all kind of fell apart. And the only team that you beat was a team that really quit on the season in Cincinnati. But I do think that there have been some bright spots. There have been some not so bright spots. What you really need to get, and what this program needs to get better at going forward and for next season and beyond, is something that DY talked about a lot tonight, is that you just didn't see a lot of fire on K-State's sideline. And I know that some of that is just how K-State rolls, and Chris Klieman's a very stoic guy. But you would like to see K-State play with more fire. And I think that that's something that they really need to do, because it just shows to everybody that we all know that all of these guys really care about the game. But that's really why you see it. That's why Reggie Stubblefield was such a loved player in one season, is that you could see emotion and passion that he played with. And I just think that they were really missing that on this team, because even going back to last year, I think last year's team had more competitive fire that you could see than this team did. And I think that is what needs to be. I don't know how you fix that, but I think that that's something that you need to really talk about, how you can bring that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. Reggie Stubblefield, I mean, it was game 1. It was clear that guy had some fire. And I do think you're missing that from this team in a lot of areas. I mean, think about where this team is at right now. I think one of the areas where Avery Johnson could improve is not even necessarily from his play on the field, but I do think that he could probably work on giving a little bit more personality and a little bit more fire or something I don't know, because I just think he's a pretty cool customer in general. And he kind of goes with the flow and it doesn't really bother him that much. But I think, when things are good, you'd like a little more enthusiasm. And when things are bad, I think you'd like a little bit more fire from him. And I would say that after tonight's game, that's probably the most emotion that I've seen. Like, you could tell that he was pretty visibly upset about how tonight went. And I would also say, for anybody worried about the portal and all this with Avery, I don't think you have to worry about that. I wasn't worried about it in general, but I think the way he spoke after the game tonight, that's certainly not something to worry about either. But he is, at this point in time, not the most outspoken guy. DJ Giddens, we know, is not that guy, and he's your most talented player on this team. But he's just not ever going to be that person. And that's not really his fault. That's just the way he's wired. And then you think about everywhere else on this team, like, where are you going to get it? And I think Austin Moore is a very mature voice and probably tells these guys a lot of good things and gives them a lot of good advice and information. But I just don't think he has kind of that same fire behind it. Again, I think it's the way a lot of these guys are wired. And I do think there's a personality play that has to come into how this team has to start to look to recruit and bring guys in, where it's not just guys with talent that you trust to play well, but you need some guys that are going to come in there and maybe MF their teammates a couple of times, or, to the opposite side, like DY was trying to point out, if somebody makes a big play, like, be there and be happy for him. Don't just go celebrate the touchdowns, but, like, you light a dude up, like, celebrate that. So I think there's that element to this, certainly, where you're wondering where the leadership from within is going to come from and kind of give this team some personality, because I do think this team lacked some personality this year. And last year's team maybe had some of that, but again, like, say what you will about Will Howard, but a very emotional guy and certainly has some of that. I mean, we saw it at different points last year. I mean, Will Howard and how he handled running in that go-ahead touchdown at KU, that might be the most emotion that we've seen in the last 2 seasons from a player after a specific play. And then you think about some of the other guys on that team in years before that. So I think that is significant to think about moving forward. Fan, your turn to kind of give an idea on what the state of this program is and your confidence that things can be better moving forward.
Yeah, I think you both have said some good things. I think you echoed a lot of things that I agree with about what Klieman said after the game about the state of college football, the state of this team compared to college football, the difficulty of winning, not begrudging 8 wins. I get his point, and I think there's truth in what he says, but then you just have to compare it with expectations, and the expectations this staff has set. Like, this is, I'm not blaming them in some way, but I'm saying this staff has set the expectation that this was supposed to be a season that K-State competed for a Big 12 title, and that's not going to happen. This is a season where K-State was expected to set the tone as one of the new Big 12 frontrunners, and that didn't happen. And really, it fell apart in November. Going into November, K-State was 7-1 and looked on pace to going to play one of the worst teams in the league in Houston, and looked on pace to be that team. And then you go to Houston, you have probably, and we talked about at the time, but it's going to go down as one of the worst losses in the Klieman era, period. And then that kind of led to Arizona State. You get the recovery against Cincinnati team that isn't very good, and then you have tonight, and you have a game. And I think Drew and I talked about it a lot during the game. Iowa State was trying to give this game away. They were trying to Farmageddon this thing up. At times it looked like Paul Rhodes was on the sideline at the end of that, whatever 2017 game or whatever 2016 game, and trying to set up those plays to give K-State a chance to win it. Even Iowa State missing a field goal that would have put them up 2 scores, and K-State getting the ball back and then just doing nothing with it. I mean, really, K-State had 3 drives within one score and did nothing after their last touchdown, which got it within 3 points. And that really, to me, kind of represents the whole season, and especially the last part of the season where the K-State offense really fell apart. We saw that the last month. You know, an average points per drive in the Big 12 is about 2.5 to 2.6. K-State had 3 games in the last month of 1.5 or below points per drive. Tonight was 1.5 exactly. I think it was 1.4 against Houston and 1.46 or something like that against Arizona State. And then 1.13, something like that against BYU early in the season. So this offense was so feast or famine. That's what's hard, is that there was a point after the West Virginia game, K-State had the number 1 offense in the Big 12 by all the metrics, number 1 rushing offense in the Big 12, and number 1 passing offense by a lot of the metrics if you average them out. And then the last half of the season, they may be the 10th, 12th, 13th best offense in the league. And that's not going to get it done if you want to be a title contender. And that's really, to me, what happened. The defense had its problems. The defense, the biggest complaint is it seemed like every time we gave a short field, the defense gave up a touchdown instead of a field goal or forcing that turnover that would have been keys. But still, tonight they did enough. They held Iowa State to 2.31 points per drive and a 30% success rate. An average success rate is like 42%, 43%. So they did some nice things, but they never got that turnover. How many interceptions that probably could have been pick six went through our hands? So they don't make those plays, but I think they did enough to win. It was really the offense and then even the special teams that really let K-State down, and they did really for the last month.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, and this has kind of been the problem the last 2 years for K-State, if you think about it, where the defense, could they have done some things better? Yes. But at the end of the day, in a lot of these games, they, for the most part, did their job to give the opportunity. They did their job at Missouri in 2023. They did their job at Oklahoma State, where Will Howard threw pick after pick after pick, and K-State's defense held Oklahoma State to field goals in that game. And then against Texas, yeah, it started out ugly, but they held them off long enough to give K-State a chance in that game. And, funny enough, special teams sucked in that game, similar to how it's been this year. And so then you go and think about this season. And, the only game last year where the defense was clearly at fault was the Iowa State game. And then this year, same type of deal where I don't know what the defense was supposed to do in Provo outside of, Jacob Parrish or Marquise Siegel pulling was it an old Alabama game in one of those ESPN documentaries where the guy said he had too much Bama in him, and on the sideline he tripped an Auburn player, like returning a kick or something. Wasn't even a player, just a guy on the sideline tripped a guy. Like, outside of one of the defensive players just running on the field during a punt return or a fumble return, I don't know what they were supposed to do in that game. They were pretty helpless because of the offensive errors. Then you move on and you go to the Houston game. The defense was pretty good. They gave up one catastrophic run in that game, which, given the circumstances, pretty good. The offense screwed them over there. Then you obviously Arizona State. Defense held Arizona State to 24 points. Cam Scatterbo basically did nothing. The best offensive player for my money in the Big 12 this year. The most important player for any team in the league is Cam Scatterbo, and K-State shut him down. The defense did struggle against Jordan Tyson in that game, but again, only 24 points. The offense, they struggled. They made crucial errors. Same type of thing happened again today against Iowa State. And then in addition to that, it just feels like the flow isn't totally there right now. So that leads me to this question for you guys. I'm going to ask it to both of you. We'll start with Drew, and then once Drew's done, Fan can hop in. If you were in charge of the team, is Connor Riley back as your offensive coordinator next year?
That's tough. I feel like with how the last month went, you probably have to lean towards no. But that's what's so hard about this, is that, like Fan pointed out, the offense was so good after the first 7 or 8 games this season.
Real quick, I will throw this in there. The teams that they played in those first 7 or 8 games, Oklahoma State sucks. West Virginia sucks. KU 5-7, not going to a bowl game. Colorado, yeah, they're talented, but brutal defense, especially against the run. So, yes, the offense was good, but we do have to consider the opponent. Where you look at the last 4 games, obviously Houston and Cincinnati are terrible, and you played poorly against Houston, but then Arizona State and Iowa State, they're playing for the Big 12 title next weekend, and you couldn't do anything against them.
Yeah, so like with that, you probably gotta lean towards no. But what is frustrating about this too is that there are things about how Connor Riley and Matt Walls have kind of gone about being co-offensive coordinators that I've really, really liked. But there's also some things where I'm like, okay, what is the reasoning behind like this play call? And like one of them for me, I understand that they wanted to set it up to be a 4th and shorter, but I don't really love running Joe Jackson on that 3rd and 5 to set up the 4th and 2. Because for me, if you're going to run it on 3rd and 5 in that situation, why not run it on 4th and 2 when you're getting a pretty good enough push to, I think, potentially get 2 yards in that situation, then kind of reevaluate and reset. But instead, K-State elects to pass it, and Garrett Oakley was open. Not a great ball, but that's still one that you probably got to come down with. But there's been things that I've liked. I've really liked a lot of the goal line stuff, which is actually why it was kind of wild to me that K-State really struggled on that one set of downs at the 5-yard line, because it feels like they've been so good at dialing things up and getting guys open and scheming guys open, but it couldn't happen tonight. But some things that I've liked, some things that I wouldn't like, probably more that I wouldn't like. So I would probably lean towards a new offensive coordinator.
Well, I think the name of the game in this sport is to produce, and I think when you have the wild fluctuations in production levels that I pointed out, and your lows are this low, especially when you have 3 of these in your last 4 games, you do start to have major questions about what to do going forward. So I think it's a tough situation because overall the numbers aren't going to look that bad. Like I said, we're going to set a school record most likely for yards per play average for a season. So you look at that, but then at the end of the day, when you get to that tough spot, when you get to November and you can't score enough to win some games you probably should have won. And I agree with you. I think Arizona State probably was the worst game of this stretch. Houston was definitely a winnable game, and tonight was a winnable game. And when you don't get that done, at the end of the day, this is a production sport. Guys are making a lot of money. You also have to consider what players are thinking about their futures in your offense. And if that's not looking good going forward, then you may have to make that change. So it's a tough situation because of all that. But at the end of the day, these guys are being paid a lot of money to win games at K-State, and they didn't get it done to the level we all expect this season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And because there's this element to it too, where you cannot waste Avery Johnson. I know that some people don't like him now because, they think that he's a big part of the problem. And look, Avery Johnson has to be better in some spots. The 3rd down run tonight, or maybe I think it was the 3rd down, that K-State ended up turning the ball over on downs instead of kicking the field goal. They had 4th and 2. Look, I'm not out there in that exact spot on the field, but from my point of view, it seemed like he stepped out of bounds a couple of steps early. Like maybe he could have fought a little bit more to get the 1st down there instead of putting yourself in a position where you have to go for it on 4th down or kick a long field goal and possibly end up with a mistake. Like There is still a little bit of that timidness there with the running. That's a little bit concerning. That's, got to change. The accuracy with throwing the ball, that has to get a little bit better. But then again, that kind of goes to the offense thing where, I question what situations to throw the ball he's being put in. And obviously, there's been a lot of talk. K-State's got to get better playmakers on the field at receiver. If you're going to use them, you got to have better guys at that spot. I think in an ideal world, you move on from Connor Riley as your offensive coordinator, because at the end of the day, when you have Avery Johnson as your quarterback, as dynamic as they come, when you have DJ Giddens as your running back, one of the best running backs in the Big 12, probably one of the 2 or 3 best, not, like honorable mention, 7th or 8th, John Kurtz. But, you have that, and you have some of the other elements to this offense. It's stunning to hear you say, Fan, that this team might set a record for most yards per play. And yet I never once this season felt like this offense was reliable. Maybe the closest we came to that was the Colorado-West Virginia stretch. That might be the best that the offense played this year, were those 2 games back-to-back. And it's still, you just never felt like you could trust them. And that's a big part of this. When you have those type of players on your offense, you want to feel like every time you go on the field, you're going down the field to score. Like the opportunity is there. And the issue is there are too many times this year when the offense is on the field, and the thought in the back of my head is, man, I really hope they don't screw this up right now. The big turnover, the big mistake. Like, I don't see it. I never once felt like K-State was taking the field and they were going to go score a touchdown this season. It just never happened. And that to me is what should signal that some change needs to happen. Like the best, comparison that I could use for this is a couple of years ago when I watched the Cowboys. I'm a Cowboys fan, born after the Super Bowls, born in 98. So I haven't seen them win shit. When Dak Prescott dropped back and was winding up to throw a deep ball, I never once was worried about, something bad could happen here. You go back, not this past season, but the season before that, Dak had one of his worst years throwing the football ever. And ball after ball was ending up in the opponent's hands. And I went from never once having to worry about what his decision was going to be to every time he stepped back, I was wincing like, oh no, this is not going to end well. And he was able to rehab that image. Like last year, he got me back into a position where like I wasn't worried about it. He was more of the regular Dak that we've seen over his career. And that's where this K-State offense needed to get to over the course of this season, because Connor Riley has not done this before in his career, and he has not done it at a high enough level to warrant getting a blind faith second season just because we liked a couple of the things that he did. He needed to be able to get stronger as the year went on. And unfortunately, it seems like the Connor Riley OC experience probably peaked around game 5 through 7. And that just can't happen. And I think that, there's going to have to be tough decisions made, and we'll see how it ends up turning out. I don't know if it's necessarily that Connor Riley gets a full-blown demotion or that he's not on this staff anymore, but it's going to be a delicate situation. But I still go back to Chris Klieman after the loss to Arizona State. Tim Fitzgerald asked him a very basic question about what needs to change. And it seemed more so like in the moment, what needs to change for this team right now to start doing things and winning games. And instead, Chris Klieman immediately answered it like I'm not talking about staff moves or something like that right now, where that made me think, okay, he knows that he has to make some changes at some point. So I think that does come. And I think Connor Riley in this role has to be one of them, which is unfortunate because I do think he's been a good offensive line coach. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good person to have on this staff in terms of what he can do to get guys fired up. Like the players clearly love him. Even as the offense has struggled at times, I don't think Avery Johnson dislikes Connor Riley. Like I think he likes Connor Riley. So it's a weird time for K-State, and they got to get better from this moment right now because they have gone backwards. A 10-win season, a 9-win season, and now here they are, 8 wins. Now they certainly could make it 9, but it's not going to feel the same. These 4 losses are not equal to what the 4 losses were last year. and not like, what the 4 losses ended up being in 2022 when it was you lose to TCU, you lose to Texas. I guess it was, and then and Tulane, and then you lose to Alabama. Like, not the same story. So we'll see how all that ends up working out. All right. Guess that's all we'll talk about for now on K-State. We can get a little bit more. I'll give Drew. You got anything else you want to say on the Cats before we move on?
Just we are spoiled that K-State is 8-4, and we're really disappointed. But 8-4, like, you shouldn't have to be satisfied with 8-4, and especially with how this 8-4 has kind of came about. So I think that that's also just good perspective. Like, there are a lot of programs that would kill for the consistency that K-State has and has had for literally since Mason and I have been alive, really outside of a handful of seasons. So it feels gross right now, and it will probably feel gross for a while. But this is still better than going 5-7. If I'm going to call somebody out, this is better than going 5-7.
That's true. It is better than going 5-7. It doesn't feel great though, and really none of these losses you think none of them are justifiable or make a lot of sense. Fan, your last thoughts on the Cats here?
Yeah, I look at the standings, and K-State is 8th in the Big 12, and I think 8th. Like, that sounds terrible to be 8th. I know there's 16 teams, but that's not where this program is expected to be. So that's part of it. I do see 3 of the 4 losses are to 3 of the teams, the 3 teams that finished 10-2 overall in the season. So, like, yeah, that's fine, but it's still Arizona State, BYU, and Iowa State. Those are all solid. They're all top 20 teams. 2 of them are playing for the Big 12 title. One of them probably is going to be in the college football playoff. But you can't help but look at that and say that should be us. Like, we should be in that game. We should be playing for that opportunity to go for the football playoff, because that was the expectation all season. That was the expectation the offseason. And K-State's not going to get there, and it's disappointing when you don't get to where you think you should be. And then part of it is the recency thing. When you lose 3 of your last 4, that just makes it even worse, especially when you had that going into November. You were in that conversation, and then now you're not, and you're not even close. You're 8th in the league, and that's just not where that's just a bummer of a way to finish the season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So we'll have plenty more to kind of look back on this season, and we'll have a better encapsulation of it all once the bowl game ends and transfer portal stuff starts to happen over the next couple of weeks, and the 2025 version of this team kind of starts to come together in a bigger way. So we'll have all of that. I will just finish by saying this. Like, I was one of the people in the preseason that my Big 12 ballot, I had K-State number 1 because I just looked at it, and I looked at the schedules like, I don't know that, these teams that are on here, like, I think K-State should win all of these games. And BYU, obviously better than we thought. K-State still should have won that game. Houston, they still should have won that game. Arizona State at home, you probably still should have won that game. And then this game, maybe not necessarily, but then you see how it played out, and K-State probably should have won the game tonight. But they made catastrophic errors, and Iowa State didn't. And that's the difference this year in the Big 12, is you look around, what did Arizona State not do against K-State? They didn't turn the ball over. No, they ended up having one. It was really inconsequential at the point it happened. Iowa State did not turn the ball over. BYU did not turn the ball over. Those teams did not shoot themselves in the foot. And K-State put their hand in the air and said, I want to be the Plaxico Burress of the Big 12 this season. So that's the thing that has to change. You got to get better there, and then you got to find some other ways to get better in the margins, and that goes back to what we talked about with, like, the energy thing and all of that. I didn't just pick K-State to win the conference this season because I went to K-State and because I'm a homer. I like to think of myself as a pretty realistic person, but I thought this team was going to be good. And they turned out to just be okay. And that's the thing that makes this season unacceptable. And that's why there have to be changes. Not every 8-4 season is created equally. And I've tried to make that clear tonight. But there are other teams in the country that went 8-4 this year. They should throw a party. There are other teams that they go 8-4 and heads need to roll. And K-State is one of those teams right now. So we'll see what that ends up looking like moving forward. But it's not a fun season. This was not an enjoyable season for K-State. I mean, I don't know where everybody found their enjoyment, yet the streak continued. That's a positive. You'll have the last minute win against Colorado, but it doesn't mean anything. That's the thing right now with the way the league is set up. You don't have big bad Texas and Colorado or Texas and Oklahoma there anymore to kind of run the show and feel like they should be the favorites. You have to step up now and be the man. And that's why this is such a disappointing season. Like I don't know. I don't know where to go moving forward for K-State on this front. I think it'll get better. I'm not overly concerned. There are individual problems with this team, but they don't have to be long-term. And I think that's something to keep in mind moving forward. But we'll close things out. Big 12 today. Nothing really crazy happened after we all kind of wanted it to. And unfortunately, it will be Arizona State against Iowa State in the Big 12 championship next weekend. Either of you guys have a lean on what you think happens next week? Because unfortunately, I think Iowa State is going to win the Big 12 title, and we're all going to want to not focus on football ever again.
My lean right now would probably be Iowa State if Jordan Tyson can't play, and it sounds like he won't be able to play. I just don't know if Arizona State has the firepower to really keep up with Iowa State.
Yeah, I'd agree, especially the Tyson situation for Arizona State. He's such a big part of their offense, receiving the football. Even with Iowa State's flaws, I mean, they're not a very good running team, although they ran the ball decently against K-State today. They're not real great against the run, although they did stop K-State decently today, enough. But I just think they're the more complete team. I think they're the more experienced team, and I think Iowa State would be the favorite to win that game, and I think they probably will.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to say. I'll be pulling for you, Sun Devils. Forks up. I just don't know that you're going to be able to get it done, especially like Drew said, if Jordan Tyson's not able to go out there. Other things in the Big 12 today that are of note as the season closes out. KU, in surprising fashion, blown out by Baylor. And now that's something that to keep in mind next year is Baylor is going to be a pretty good preseason darling. They finish 8-4, and they rip off 6 straight wins to finish the regular season. And Sawyer Robertson, he might be the preseason favorite for Player of the Year in the Big 12 next season because he had another phenomenal day. They beat KU 45-17. So KU ruins the season for Colorado and BYU. They also get a win over Iowa State over a 3-week stretch, and yet they come up a game shy of bowl eligibility. And then Houston tried. They turned the ball over late. They lose to BYU 30-18. Arizona State blasted their rival Arizona 49-7. Texas Tech beat the crap out of West Virginia 52-15. So Neil Brown finishes 6-6. And then Cincinnati loses to TCU 20-13 in a game that started snowing in the second half and the scoring stopped there. So that's what took place in the Big 12 to close out the regular season. And Fan alluded to it where K-State ends up finishing in the league standings just based off however they end up spitting them out. But K-State went 5-4 in Big 12 play this year. That means Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor all had better records than K-State. Absolutely unacceptable to be that low in this spot. But you end up with the Big 12, K-State being 8th there. 8 teams finished 8-4 or better in the Big 12 this year. And only one other team made it to bowl eligibility, and that is West Virginia at 6-6. So the Big 12 will have 9 teams playing in the postseason. But that will do it for us today. Like I said, we'll have more coverage throughout the next couple of days, weeks, months of the K-State offseason, which really begins in earnest on Wednesday with signing day. We will have a live signing day show Wednesday afternoon. Drew and I will break down the entire class and discuss everything that goes into that. We'll also have a little bit of a preview for it on Tuesday as well. So we are out of here. It's a late night in Iowa. Glad to be done with it. And let's turn the page and hope that K-State doesn't look like this in Ireland next year, because if you think a drive from Ames back to Manhattan or wherever you're going sucks, certainly traveling back from Dublin to Kansas after losing to Iowa State would be a real kick in a place that you don't want one.